Hey guys, this is Jonathan McCormack. I'm an attachment specialist in New York. You can find me at attachmenthealinghelp.com. And I wanted to talk about loneliness and attachment styles. Loneliness is a bit of like an invisible epidemic, and people are suffering terrible from it. You get little stories in the news. England has their own kind of loneliness czar to handle all the elderly. And I visit these people, the elderly, in different homes, and it's terribly sad. They're all alone. Some of these people go in at age 65. They have no children. They have no friends. And they might be in there for 30 years. And this generation is looking at that and they're terrified. It's fun to hop around and to be free. But then you start getting older and you see this and the future seems terrifying. I hear this a lot from people. And it's a difficult burden to bear. And it's new. This is brand new. People being alone in old age, well, that didn't happen before the Industrial Revolution. There's a couple ways that loneliness impinges upon attachment theory. It's well known that avoidants are desperately lonely, but they're so shut down, they're out of touch with those feelings. They don't feel the actual need until they start waking up a little bit. And if you are in a relationship with an avoidant, oftentimes it'll seem like they're completely into you. A couple months later, they just shut down. And it's almost like you're invading their space. You're in their way. And the reason is because they don't get emotional regulation from intimacy. That means they have to emotionally regulate themselves, and they spend an enormous amount of energy doing that. That's why they need a lot of time alone. If you are anxious and in a relationship, the best thing to do is realize it's not personal, it's not you. They're not rejecting you. They need this space. And a lot of these people feel awful because they say, like, wow, I can see how it seems like I'm rejecting them. They're so cut off from their emotions. This is very common. They'll be in a relationship. They'll break up with the person. And they'll feel free. And they'll be so happy. I have a new zest of life all this time for myself. My freedom. That's what they want. It doesn't hit them what happened, that they just gave up a relationship, till sometimes months later. And this can happen 8-9 months later after the relationship breaks up. And I'll talk to them. They don't miss the girl. They don't miss the guy. They're happy to be out of it. 3 months later, 4 months later, around 8 months later, boom, it hits them. They lost. They had someone. They had someone. And it takes them that long to process the emotions. That can be utterly devastating. It also happens when I work with people. I'm not a relationship person. I do different modalities like parts work, the ideal parent figure protocol, where we use visualizations where you're getting your developmental needs met, your need to be seen, known. And when I start working with them, it's great. And then they start waking up. And all of a sudden they realize how empty they are, how empty their life is. They've gone years and decades without emotional warmth. And it hits them. They know it, but no, they feel it now. And it's devastating. It's devastating. They have to grieve through it. I remember, I myself am not Catholic, but I remember seeing a special on Mother Teresa, and she said, loneliness is the worst poverty. And I thought, really? Really, loneliness? And her nuns were talking. Her nuns came from Calcutta. And they said, well, you came over from Calcutta to the Bronx. I'm in New York. I've been to the Bronx a million times. I have buddies down there. And they go, how was the Bronx? And they said, well, we weren't prepared. We weren't prepared for how bad it would be. We weren't prepared for the depth. The depth. Calcutta is, I mean, it's beyond bad. Think of the worst poverty you can imagine. And then double that. Calcutta has people dying in the streets. How can the Bronx be worse than Calcutta? What could be worse than starving for food? I'm going to talk about it. It's proven that babies are more, rather than food, it's love and warmth. That's actually a stronger emotion. I'll talk about Harlow and the monkeys and how he proved that. It's a horrifying story, but it's true. And when I heard her nun saying that, I had a very hard time. I mean, the misery, but she was like, well, they do have family. I mean, they're starving, but they're together. It's poverty. They have terrible diseases, terrible pains, but they have people around them. So it's less of kind of an existential terror. I had a hard time believing it, but as I researched it, that's absolutely true. The thing about loneliness is it's not cured by other people. Not all of it, There's a social loneliness. But some of the most lonely people I know are in marriages. And I know someone who goes home to his wife, sleeps next to her every night, and she hates him, and he knows it. And he's been doing it for years, and he's living in a nightmare. So people who get married to escape loneliness, that does not work. It's very common, very common. I'm gonna get married to take care of my loneliness. My life is directionless, so I'm gonna have a kid to fix that. Good luck with that. It simply doesn't work. One of the reasons that people are suffering from loneliness, though, that's new, is the social meanings we give it. So if you're a man, well, I knew a woman. She turned 30 and she tried to kill herself because she wasn't married yet. And I know men, they're suicidal because they don't have wives. They don't think they ever will. Why? It's because the meaning they're attaching to it. Think about it. If you're not married, what does that mean? Well, the men I talk to, they take it like Mother Nature, this big Mother Nature herself, has rejected me. Mother Nature. Thousands, tens of thousands of years, all my ancestors have made it. Someone chose them. And me, Mother Nature says, no, there's something the matter with you. And for men, women kind of make that decision. Women kind of say, are you worthy? Are you going to be man enough to, fight the woolly mammoth? Are you going to be responsible enough to take care of the kids? Are you going to be, do you have the skills? All this stuff. Are you worthy to be a member of this tribe? And when a woman chooses you, psychologically, it's like, yes, you are. You are a member of society. I mean, think about it. Until recently, you had to be married to get anywhere in the world. If you wanted to move up in business, they'd say, well, Johnson, I know you want to be a manager or CEO. Time to get married. Prove to those boys upstairs you have it in you. It's hard to trust a man who's not married. Even in churches, I went to some kind of Protestant church. This woman, I drove this elderly woman. She needed a ride, so I gave her a ride there, invited me in. It was nice. But to be on the council, to make the choices, you had to be married, They only took married men and married women. Those were the elders. And there's this idea like, boy, if you weren't married, there's kind of something wrong with you. There's some truth in that. And the idea that Mother Nature rejected me is almost like God rejected me. Oof, I mean, the nature, the universe, God is kind of all mixed up psychologically when we think about these things emotionally. And I remember the movie The Drop with James Gandolfini, the Sopranos guy. I think Thomas Hardy was in it. And he's kind of this lonely guy, works at a bar. And he goes to Catholic Mass, and he's sitting there. He never goes up and gets the Eucharist. And he's like sitting there thinking, seeing all these couples. And he's like, man, it's almost like God's like welcoming everyone to heaven. Welcome. Stop. Not you. Heaven banned. Gerard Manley Hopkins, a poet, coined that term, heaven band. No, not you. It's hard to be lonely and to be alone. Someone told me, it's like starving. It is touch starvation. You need to be touched. You don't need sex. You need to be touched to live. It's like being in the desert, and of course you're thirsting and there's nothing around. That's tough, very tough. But this is worse, because it's like being in the desert, thirsty, starving. And everyone around you has a big cup of water. Everyone, you look all around you and they're drinking the water, and it drives you insane. If you never saw it, you can get by. If you're never judged for it. The truth is, though, it doesn't mean anything. It's an unusual way to think of things. But I would suggest that what's happening here is not the circumstance. It's the meaning your mind is attaching to it. There's a famous story I tell about attachment theory. They took a bunch of 8-year-olds and they told the 8-year-old little girls, boys are going to come in, ask you to dance. Just say no. First boy comes in, asks the little girl to dance. She says no. Goes to the second, goes to the third. Second boy comes in. Do you want to dance? First girl says no. Oof. He collapses. He grabs the chair, pulls it to the corner, and starts crying. And you could say, ooh, why is that little boy crying? Well, that's because he just got his heart broke. That's because she rejected him. But no. Because that first boy got rejected. He didn't react like that. It was the meaning his mind was attaching to it. The first boy got rejected, but didn't mean anything about him. I mean, that is true. How other people react tell us about them. Always. It always gives information about them, like a Rorschach test. That second boy probably attached a meaning like, well, if I got rejected, that means I'm unlovable. That means I'm not worthwhile. But that's good news, because if it's your mind attaching meanings, you can change that. I do that. Deep unconscious reprogramming works really well with people who are suffering heartbreak to get over someone. That's something I do. So those are the social meanings that make it so much harder. And of course I can say that, hey, it doesn't mean anything. And yet the whole world is like, it kind of does. It kind of does. And there's a social hierarchy to marriage where there wasn't before. Everyone got married. The poorest guy got married to the richest guy got married. That's how society was laid out. And of course, historically, we had something like a caste system, something like it, in most societies for a long time. But now, it's very much about competition. It's very Darwinian. And not everyone does get married. If you do, that probably means something about you. That probably means you have resources, you're well-liked, you have what it takes, And if you're not married, that probably means, if you don't want to get married, that's fine. But a lot of people do. And those people, they want to, and yet they're rejected. I tell you, this is not going to be popular, but the real truth is, every single person watching this, every single person could be married by the end of this month if they wanted to. If you're not married, that's probably a decision. I don't blame you. I told my friend this, and he goes, no. He's 40. He goes, no, I've tried. I've been all over. I'm like, oh, hold on. He's my buddy. And I said, well, hold on. What about that lady Kathy? She works at the Home Depot. She likes you. And he goes, what, Kathy? She's 55. And she's 100 pounds overweight. And also, she works at the Home Depot. And also, wait. That's your decision. That's your decision. There is a girl, utterly lovely, who would marry you. I don't blame him. He says no. Well, okay, that's fine. But let's not pretend that there's no choices. There are choices. But they're just not worth it for you. That's fine. Actually, there's a good poem by the last real Bohemian. There's no Bohemians left anymore. The last one lived in Croatia. This guy named Tin Ujevic. And he wrote this. I was like fairly devastated when I read this, called A Daily Lament. Someone sent this to me. So it goes, Daily Lament. How hard it is not to be strong. how hard it is to be alone, and to be old yet still be young, and to be weak and powerless, alone, with no one anywhere, dissatisfied and desperate, and trudge bleak highways endlessly and be trampled in the mud with no star shining in the sky, without your star of destiny to play its twinklings in your crib, with rainbows and false prophecies. Oh God, remember all the glittering fair promises which you have afflicted me? Oh God, remember all the great loves, the great victories, the wreaths of laurel and gifts, and know you have a son who walks the weary valleys of the world among sharp thorns and rocks and stones, through unkindness and unconcern, with his feet bloodied under him and with his heart an open wound. His bones are full of weariness, his soul is ill at ease and sad, and he's neglected and alone and sisterless and brotherless and fatherless and motherless, with no one dear, no close friend, and he has nowhere except thorn twigs to pierce his heart and fire blazing from his palms, lonely and utterly alone under the hemmed in the vault of blue on dark horizons of high seas. Who can he tell his troubles to when no one's there to hear his call? Not even brother wanderers. Oh God, you sear your burning word too hugely through this now thrown throttle inside my cry. Because I crave a powerful word, because I crave an answering voice, someone to love or holy death. For I am sick of being weak and sick of being all alone, seeing I could be hale and strong, and seeing that I could be loved, but I'm sickest of all, to be so old yet still be young. He was an insane drunk. He used to stumble about, old man smoking cigarette in these rags. But at the end, he's like, seeing I could be. Well, boy, if I had someone, I'd be strong. I'd be somebody, and I could do things. That imaginary. So it's not just. It's almost like a life we mourn for, that we could have had, or unlived and unloved life. Diana Fosher is one of the great attachment psychologists. Talks about resilience. To deal with all the things, because you don't have other people to regulate you when you're all alone. And she says the roots of resilience and the capacity to withstand emotionally aversive situations without resorting to defensive exclusion are to be found in the sense of being understood by and existing in the mind and heart of a loving, attuned, and self-possessed other. You know somewhere out there, you're inside someone else's head. They're thinking about you. You're not completely closed in on yourself. You're not suffocating. That's the basis of resilience. So when you see these lonely people out there falling apart, so emotional, so depressed, and you look at them and think, why? Lives aren't that bad. Okay, they're alone, but not starving. They don't have access to that resilience that other people have. They're freezing emotionally or spiritually. There's an old African saying, beware of the boy you cast out of the village, for he returns to burn down the village for warmth. And a lot of the things people do, sex and drugs and compulsive activities, it's not like people get dragged to hell. A lot of times they run to hell and bang on the doors and beg to come in. Why? Well, it's scorching, but it's warmth. It's something. At least you're not freezing. You're tortured, but you're feeling something. Loneliness comes from three places, really. Feeling disconnected from others. Well, there's things you can do about that. That's making friends. And part of the attachment deal is when people come, they want a relationship. They want to attach to a romantic partner, of course. It's hard to work out, though. Back in the day, you used to have a lot of friends, and she would have a lot of friends, and it would take a village to make a couple work. I had a friend who got married in India, which was really cool because they had this ritual where if he had a problem with his wife, two of her friends volunteered that he could talk to them. And he would talk to them every couple of weeks, just what's going on. And he got two of his friends who could talk to her if she had problems that she didn't know how to confront him with. Boy, that's brilliant. I mean, back in the day, Grandma was the great wise one. Ask Grandma. Yeah, Grandma, do you think this guy is good for her? Ask Grandma's advice. She's been around, Now, there are no grandmas like that. Or they're dying out. And we really don't have any guidance. So, one, feeling disconnected from others. The second one of loneliness, so, is feeling rejected. And you don't have to do that. I get it. If you're all alone, feeling disconnected, that's hard to overcome. But feeling rejected, that's going to stop you from knowing other people. Aristotle used to say, the bad man can't have friends. But one reason is because he would hide from other people. He knew he was doing bad things. So he wouldn't let people see him. Well, if you feel rejected, you're not doing anything bad. But you still really don't want to be seen. This is the double bind. You want to be known and seen. You do. You're desperate to be known and seen. Someone to see me, to see what I go through. But if that happened, they'd see you and you'd be embarrassed. Perhaps you'd feel shamed. So the alternative is to isolate. But then face despair, shame or despair, fear or despair. Let someone see me and feel that fear, or isolate and feel that despair. I want nothing more than to be seen and nothing more than to hide. And this is the contradiction, that's that attachment issues. But you can fix that, your sense of emptiness and isolation. You don't have to think of yourself as rejected. You can fix that. And the third one you can also fix, feeling disconnected from yourself. That's a huge thing. Because even when you get into the relationship and you find someone, you have to act from yourself. This is the part of you that's compassionate and curious. When you're talking to someone, you're curious about them. You're not trying to get your point in. You're like, no, what's going on with you? Yeah. You have to be in touch with that self, because that self is also going to soothe you, show compassion to yourself. And you have to have a relationship with yourself. A lot of people say they hate themselves. I really don't believe that's actually what's going on, but I understand why people think that. So you can fix that too in therapy. So 2 out of 3, and that does help with the loneliness. So how? How can you feel more connected? Well, number one thing is to notice your feelings. We're very disassociated. Especially avoidance. They just have no idea what's going on with your body. In fact, many avoidants hate their body. They wish they didn't even have a body. I've heard them say that towards more the schizo side or even on the autism spectrum. Well, your body is where joy is. If you don't get in touch with your body, you're never going to experience joy. Real delight, Sex is never going to be satisfying. Then the second one is to name your feelings. This is so hard. I have so many avoidant clients. I do the ideal parent protocol, and we imagine ideal parents giving them delight and soothing them. And I say, hey, how does that feel? Every avoidant, the guy will say, good. Well, what's the sensation in your body? Sensation's good. Pretty good. It's like, well, good is not a feeling. That's not an emotion. Now, when it's negative, when I say, oh, the ideal mother is hugging you, how does that feel? And it feels a little strange or uncomfortable. Boy, they all of a sudden, they're poets. They're like, well, it seems very uncomfortable. I have this feeling deep in my stomach, feels almost like a disgust, feels like a small panic, and also an odd feeling. Like they'll go through it. It's like, whoa, for negative emotions, you have those down. And the truth is that we focus on the negative emotions. It's human nature. If there's a fly in your salad, you stare at the fly. But with attachment issues, that's all you see. You have to, because growing up, you're always on the lookout for bad things. If you had one of those childhoods, you're not focused on the good things. You don't have to. The good things aren't going to kill you. They're not going to worry you. Focus on the bad. You're constantly looking at them. So for anxious attachment, if you're an anxious person and you're in a relationship with an avoidant, anxious people are always on the lookout, hypervigilant, for signs that the connection is slipping away. That's what they're looking for. So if you go through a week and your boyfriend does 10 great things for you and 2 rude things, the 2 rude things are what you hyper-focus on, and gets blown up and gets stuck in your head, and that's all you think about. My God, he just walked right by me. He didn't even say hi. What is this about? Did I do something? Does he hate me? Why would he hate me? Da-da-da-da. So one woman, I was asking how she cured her anxious attachment, and her therapist had her every week write down the good things about her boyfriend, because it would go over her head. She's not used to looking at the good things. So she'd be like, well, he did this, kissed me goodbye, asked me how I was doing, texted me in the morning, did this. He also did these things, which we need to address, okay? So let's not ignore them. But he also did all these things. And she had to train her brain. And she did that for a couple months. And I've heard a couple other therapists use that with anxious people. It's tough because you have to actually sit there and do it, you know? So you notice your feelings, name your feelings. You accept them instead of trying to run away. Like, no. Instead of saying like, oh, I feel nervous. I hate myself for feeling nervous. I feel so needy. I hate when I feel that way. Just accept it. Just abide in it. Just accept it. And practice is a huge self-compassion. If you want to have a good relationship, you have to be compassionate to yourself because you're human and you're going to mess up a lot. Self-compassion, Dana Fosha says self-compassion is a big part of connecting to yourself. And connecting yourself is a daily process. Focus on your feelings, let go of judgments, and be kind to yourself. And it takes practice. You just don't learn to do it. You practice it. You know? Well, how? Say, so you do mess up, you do something. So how? How do you practice this? Okay, well, first of all, there's 4 things you can do. Consider how you would treat someone else. So I was talking to a girl, and she did something very minor, and she hated herself for it. And I was like, well, what if your friend did that? What would you tell her? And she goes, yeah, I did this. I hate myself. What would you tell your friend? Would you be like, yeah, you're a hateful person? No. She said, yeah, if it was a friend, I wouldn't say that. Learn to treat yourself like a beloved friend. Learn to treat yourself like a beloved friend. Because your life depends on it. For a lot of us, it does. Watch your language. How are you talking to yourself, you know? You learn to comfort yourself, thirdly, with a physical gesture, you know, bilateral tapping. And finally, the 4th thing you can do is guided meditations, where you practice getting the love and delight in all those things you didn't get. So if you want to know where you're at with this, the first thing you should do is check out what's your primary attachment. Even if you're all alone, who is it? It could be your therapist. It could be your priest. It could be your mother. But it's going to be somebody. It could be a friend. Even if you're not even that close, someone's primary. Start there. Whoever's primary, work on that relationship. Perhaps you're living at home and your primary relationship's with your father and you hate him. That's fine. Work there. Work there. Work in that, setting boundaries, expressing yourself. Work there. And 2, look at your substitute attachments. For an avoidant, on a lonely Saturday night, instead of reaching out to a human, he'll grab a book or a syringe or anything to constantly distract himself from his body and himself. And those are substitute attachments. That's what you're doing. You're substituting for people. You're using these things to emotionally regulate. And once you look at how many things you're doing, look at those. And if it's true, okay, every night I watch Netflix for 5 hours, say. Well, if that's your substitute attachment, let's try to half that. So what are you going to do the other half of the time? Well, see if you can replace your primary. Maybe they're more involved. And if not, we're going to work on getting a person, a human attachment. You can use animals, though. Start there. Perhaps you guys have seen that movie, 28 Days. Sandra Bullock plays the alcoholic. She gets out, and they say, well, you know, if you want to get into a relationship, it's tough. You got to start with a plan. Buy yourself a plan. Take care of that for a couple of years. After a couple of years, get yourself like a dog or a cat for like a year or two. Then you can be in a human relationship. Well, I remember when I was, like 20 years ago, young, and I saw that movie and I thought, yes, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. So I went and I didn't buy a plant. I didn't buy a spider plant because I was like, oh, that's a lot of commitment. I'm still very fear. That's too much for me. I will buy a cactus. You know, that seems pretty easy to take care of, right? So I bought the cactus. You have to water like once every 8 months. And I'm going to start this cactus. And eventually I'm going to get a dog. And then I'm going to get a girl. And da-da-da. The damn thing died. The damn thing died. The cactus died. And I remember being devastated. I was like, wow, I am less nurturing than a desert. That ain't going to be good. That ain't going to work out, you know? Like, girls need more attention than being watered like every 8 months. Like that's you know, a tough gig. So I had a long way to go, you know. But that's one of the things, if you recognize yourself, and if you want to know how well you nurture someone else, how well do you nurture yourself when you're going through a hard time? Are you compassionate to yourself? Start practicing that now on you, because if you expect to have a relationship, you're going to have to practice that on them. For a lot of us, it's very easy for other people. But the more we practice on ourselves, the more we'll be able to receive it from other people too. That is necessary. Not just to give delight and support, to receive it. People avoidance will not receive anything. I have a friend who's, I think, avoidant. He's been married for like 20 years, and his wife has never seen his underwear. He does, she can do laundry, other things, but no, not his underwear. It's just too intimate. It's just too, I don't know. I've asked him, and that's what he told me. He's like, I don't know, it's just too intimate. You know, I'm like, your own wife, like, okay, I'll have sex with her and we'll have kids and everything, but I don't want to get too intimate here. I don't want, you know, my underwear, whoa, back up, you know. But that's just his avoidant, you know. And he will just not let her do almost anything for her, though. For him, he just will not accept it, you know. And a woman wants to be needed. She wants to do that, just like a man wants to give to a woman, you know. That's another part about being alone, is men aren't doing very well. So what happens if men don't have families? Well, we form gangs, kill a lot of people, you know, put a needle on an arm, overdose from fentanyl. That's what we do if we don't have anyone. Because these relationships structure your life, and without structure, yourself kind of falls apart. If you had a strong maternal presence, you internalize that holding, because your mother holds you, gives you space, you know. But if you didn't get that, you kind of fall apart pretty easy without a lot of structure. You know, you need like one of those 9-to-5 jobs that's very, very strict. And that helps you regulate yourself too. Have little habits, you know. Yeah, so I just wanted to talk about Harlow's monkeys. Harlow was someone should make a movie about this guy. You guys have probably seen it. He's the guy who, like in the 50s, he took a wire monkey. It doesn't even look like a monkey. It looks like a wire cylinder with like a stupid head on it. Took 2 of them, right? The wire monkey put like a bottle, some milk, food. The other one, no food, but he wrapped it in cloth. So he had, and they gave the baby monkeys a choice. Do you want the wire mom with food, or the cloth mom? The warmth, you'll starve to death, but with the warmth, no food. Well, back in the day, they figured obviously to survive, you're going to choose the food just to survive, right? That's not true, though. That's not what happened. Touch is more important than food, and he proves that. the little monkeys, and you should look it up. Look up. I mean, it's heartbreaking because you see this little baby monkey attached to this cloth wire mother with these big eyes, just like terrified, just holding on for life, And it's terribly sad. And the things he did was so evil. They don't talk about it, but if you read about this guy, I mean, he had wire mothers fling the baby off, crush them, stab them. He invented the rape rack for allow the female monkeys to see what would happen. I mean, horrifying things, truly horrifying. But the mothers, the monkeys who didn't have the cloth mother and who grew up, they would savage and beat their children, ignore them. One ate their baby's arm. And the monkeys themselves, who grew up without the wire mother, had no self-esteem. They were very violent. One actually ate their own arm, self-destruction. That's because touch is a language. Touch is a language. Touch is the most intimate language. That's the first language we learn. As babies, we suck our thumbs, twirl our hair. You seek softness because it feels on your skin. That search for softness and self-touch is a search for self-soothing. Skin-to-skin contact. In those moments, you calm yourself. Lower your heart rate, cortisol levels go down, release oxytocin. And that dynamic follows right into adulthood. Touch is a language, your first one. And it's comprised of an intimate vocabulary that includes both pain and pleasure. And when you're not touched, when you're emotionally neglected, you lose that language. And it's almost like you're speechless, the language of the heart. You can't communicate intimately. You can't receive words. You feel very alienated. It's like other people are speaking a language that you just can't get. You'd like to, though, but you just can't. And the Buddhist Thich Nhat Hanh, he said once, to love without knowing how to love wounds the person we love. And that would happen with these monkeys. And Harlow proved that touch overrides the need for food. When they went to mate and get mates of their own, they just had no idea. I mean, they just rape each other. They beat each other, savage each other. They just didn't know how to get what they wanted, And Harlow proved that a mother's hug, the maternal acceptance, defines a man his entire life. I mean, that's just true. And the story itself is just horrible. I mean, it really is. So there is this one poem about Harlow's monkeys. Poets love this story because it's so dramatic. The Wire Mother. Tons of terrible poems written about this. But there's one I like called Hold Fast by Robin Beth Scher. She's around right now. She's writing poetry. So she goes, it's sad, but she goes, and she's writing about Harlow and the monkeys. The dead are for morticians and butchers to touch. Only a gloved hand. Even my son will leave a grounded wren or bat alone like a hot stove. When he spots a monarch in the driveway, he stares. It's dead, I say. You can touch it. The opposite rule. Butterflies are too fragile to hold alive. Just the brush of skin could rip a wing. He skims the orange and black whorls with only 2 fingers, the way he learned to feel the backs of starfish and horseshoe crabs at the zoo. The way he thinks we touch all strangers. I was sad to be born, he tells me, because it means I will die. I once loved someone I never touched. We played records and drank coffee from chip bowls, but Didn't speak of the days pierced by radiation. A friend said, let her pretend. She needs one person who doesn't know. If I held her, I would have left bruises. If I undressed her, I would have seen scars. So we never touched. And she never had to say she was dying. We should hold each other more while we're still alive, even if it hurts. People really die of loneliness. Skin hunger, the doctors call it. In a study on love, baby monkeys were given a choice between a wire mother with milk and a wool mother with none. Like them, I would choose to starve and hold the soft body. That last line, like them, I would choose to starve and hold the soft body. Well, yeah, we all would. And I know tons of people starving themselves to death so they look thin, injecting themselves with all sorts of hormones, drugs, everything for love, everything to be loved, to be respected, to have a place in the world. The other thing about being alone is without a family, without other people, it's hard to feel like you have a place. You don't go to restaurants. You don't go to family vacations. You don't do things. You don't invite neighbors over. You don't have board games. You don't exist that way. You're kind of on the margins. Now you can have $1 million and be totally fine, but that's not what your brain thinks. Your brain thinks, you have no one. You must be an outcast. You must be on the edge of your little tribe. You might even be kicked out of your tribe because clearly a lot of people don't like you. And if you don't have the support of your tribe, you're going to starve to death, period. You're going to starve to death. And so inside, your mind thinks that you are in danger all the time. Not only is it tough to self-regulate if you have attachment issues, not only can you now use other people to self-regulate because you're alone, also you have the added stress of that feeling that something's not right. Marriage won't fix any of that, or a relationship, and it probably won't last that long unless you fix what's inside. People hate this because they come to me and I go, okay, we're going to do parts work. We're going to work on wounded parts, and we're going to do these meditations, and it's going to take 6 months to maybe 2 years. They don't want that. They want me to tell them how to get the guy and the girl, what to say, what to do. The problem, though, is I've seen people with attachment problems go to relationship help, great people, and they learn what to say. And it helps. No, it does help. Absolutely. But a lot of times it's not enough. It doesn't work out. I'll just give you an example. So someone had these attachment problems, and I said, you really need to cure what's inside. Meanwhile, though, here's some basic things, because he was dating this girl. And I said, okay, this is one thing you can do. They wanted to go on a vacation. So this is very basic communication skills. This is what you're going to do. Go up to her and go, okay, I have some ideas where I want to go, but I want to hear you first. I want to hear everything you have to say about it, and I won't interrupt. And then I'll go, and I just appreciate if you wouldn't interrupt me. And then afterwards, we'll work it out. That's how you do it. The problem, though, is you have attachment issues. You're being activated and triggered. So he sat down, and she's going on about what she thinks of vacation. Meanwhile, he's getting triggered, because she's talking about all these things that he doesn't have the money for. And he's getting triggered. I don't have the money for that. I can't do that. What does she think? She's going to think I'm a terrible person. She's going to think I'm a bum. I'm going to fail her again. That's what she's saying. Saying, if you were a real man, you'd take me to Paris, and you can't afford it. That's what she's really saying. This is going on in his head. But he listens, and he finishes, and he's like, okay. This is what I think. And he starts to talk, and she interrupts him. Whoa, I don't think that's a good idea. And he's like, oh, well, I know, but just let me say my whole piece. Starts talking again. Boom, she interrupts second time. Why? I don't know. Maybe she's triggered, Maybe she was triggered. Maybe she was hearing things like, oh, it sounds like he's saying, I'm an idiot for suggesting this. And he's, who knows, but twice. And he just shuts down. Just lets her talk, blah, 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 blah. Shuts down, doesn't, okay, well, if that's what you think. Well, no. And she asks, okay, well, go on. No, that's what you think, that's fine. I said, you don't want to hear me, you don't want to hear me. So you can give the relationship skills, this is what you do, nonviolent communication, which it can help. I'm telling you, I haven't seen it help that much. Not with people with attachment issues. They go into it, they try it, but if you're still getting triggered, it's so much harder. And I know people don't want to hear, like, you need to spend 2 years working on yourself before you're going to make real progress. I know you don't want to hear that. At least 6 months, at least 9 months. But if you don't, you're going to be trying all these things, reading these great books. Listen, Sue Johnson's wonderful. Hold Me Tight. Please read it if you're in a relationship. Everything, I'm not a relationship specialist, But if you want to know, boy, that's the book. But if you have attachment issues, I'm telling you, you're going to have a hard time applying it. You really are. So to me, it's all about an inside job. It's all about the self. And if you can heal yourself, learn to respect yourself. Forget about loving yourself. Don't even try that. You can respect yourself. And you can be compassionate to yourself. If you can do those two things, you still might have the social isolation. But it's going to be a lot better. And you're going to be a lot less lonely. So I appreciate you guys listening to me. If you guys have any ideas or thoughts about what I said, any suggestions that I might learn from, experiences, I'd appreciate if you leave a comment. But thank you very much. This is Jonathan McCormack.